All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Empowered Esquire TV. And we are live today with the People v. R. Kelly. We will be discussing the numerous cases involving Robert Kelly. He has, as far as we know, two federal cases right now, two federal prosecutions. So we'll first kind of discuss the history of how we got here, right? So exactly what jurisdictions have pending criminal cases against R. Kelly and what those charges are, and then get into what's going on in R. Kelly's case right now. So I'm going to take a moment to post in the chat, say hello to everyone, and also do a volume check. If you can hear me well, you can see me well, give me a thumbs up or a one in the chat so I know that I can be seen and heard. We'll say hello and then we'll jump right in. So I'll just wait one moment, make sure everyone can hear me and see me. Hi, hello, Mello. Okay, awesome. Yeah, give me a thumbs up or a one in the chat to let me know you can hear me. Awesome. Hi, Pocket Watching with JT. How are you? Wonderful. Crime Spotter. Hi, how's it going? Okay, good. So I'm getting a lot of ones that everyone can see me and hear me, which is awesome. All righty. All righty. So we're going to dive right in. I'm not going to, stall too much. We've been on for only about a minute or so, right? So we'll kind of slowly walk our way into the R. Kelly case. So as I said, we're going to start with what these cases are. So what jurisdictions are prosecuting him and what they are charging him with. We're going to break down those charges. We're going to actually look at the indictments that were filed. So we will look at the actual court documents. You guys know that the big thing for me on my channel is to teach you and show you how to find real court documents and accurate court documents. So you're not listening to gossip online or he say, she say, right? You're going straight to the source. You're getting true and accurate information. Okay. So let's get started. I am going to share my screen. I have everything queued up for you, so we'll jump right in. All righty, here we go. So let us first start. I'm already on a page. All right, let's make it full screen. So here we have a press release from the Northern District of Illinois, right? So you see here Department of Justice, U.S. Attorney's Office, Northern District of Illinois. So teaching moment. Most prosecutorial offices, they have something that they call a press case. What that means is the case either involves someone who is very high profile or involves a hot button issue, and it will most definitely be in the press. Whenever something is a press case, usually the prosecuting office will issue a press release. So what we are looking at here is a press release that was issued by, as you can see, the Department of Justice, U.S. Attorney's Office for the Northern District of Illinois. Now, if you're unfamiliar with federal offices and the Department of Justice, our country is divided into districts, and each district has its own federal system. That includes your Department of Justice that has either your U.S. Attorney's Office or your United States, or your Attorney General's Office, right? Or something of that nature. So every single area has a district which has its own Department of Justice office and agencies within that office, okay? So here you have it for immediate release. Released when? Friday, July 12th, 2019. Recording artist R. Kelly arrested on federal child and obstruction charges. Chicago. Chicago recording artist Robert Sylvester Kelly, also known as R. Kelly, has been arrested on federal blank charges and obstruction charges. A 13-count indictment returned Thursday in the United States District Court in Chicago charges Kelly with producing and receiving blank and enticing minors to engage in criminal blank activity. So the press release goes on to say exactly how R. Kelly was arrested, right? And also it mentions that his indictment also charges two former employees of his music business. Daryl McDavid, who is 58, also of Chicago, and Milton Brown, also known as June Brown, 53, also of Chicago. The indictment was announced by John R. Losh Jr., United States Attorney for the Northern District of Illinois. James M. Gibbons, Special Agent in charge of the United States Immigration and Custom Enforcement Homeland Security Investigation in Chicago. And Tara Sullivan, Acting Special Agent in charge of the Internal Revenue Service Criminal Investigation Division in Chicago. Now, why is it important? Why did they need to discuss here who is announcing this indictment, right? Here is why that is important. Because that section in the press release tells you who was involved in your investigation and what R. Kelly is being charged with. So you know right off the bat, he's being charged with criminal charges, right? You see United States Attorney for the Northern District. But then you see Immigration and Custom Enforcement. So you know that there's some implication in here that he broke some type of immigration and customs law as well. Then you see we already mentioned that. Then you see the Internal Revenue Service, right? So you know that also there's an implication that some of this criminal activity implicated some type of income, right? Because the IRS was also involved. So it's important to look out for these press releases, right? Again, as I said, justice.gov, the Department of Justice will release their own official press release. It is more likely for you to get accurate information from them, right, than any of these media outlets, okay? So they talk about who's involved in the prosecution. They then go on to give you a little bit of details about the indictment, which is the norm. And down here, they mention exactly why the IRS is involved. The indictment also seeks forfeiture of a personal money judgment of approximately $1.55 million, right? So as I said, once you see the IRS is involved, you know there's some financial crime being implicated as well. Okay. They then go on to tell you, hey, listen, the public is reminded that charges contain only accusations and are not evidence of guilt. Okay. They also tell you in these press releases, another reason why they're so amazing, what type of prison sentence the person could be facing. So they tell you producing blank carries a mandatory minimum sentence of 10 years in prison and a maximum of 20 years. Teaching moment. This minimum 10 years in prison, you guys, with a maximum of 20 years is per count, not per case. So when we look at the indictment and we see how many counts of this producing blank that he's charged with, you can do the math and figure out how much time he's facing, okay? They then go on to say receiving blank and conspiring to receive it is a mandatory minimum sentence of 5 years in prison and a maximum of 20 years. The maximum sentence for enticement of a minor is 10 years. Conspiracy to obstruct justice is punishable by up to 5 years. Okay. So here they have a link here where you can see the actual indictment, and we will go there. But before we do that, I want to hop out of here for a moment and take any questions about the press release. Do we have any questions about the press release that we just looked at from the Northern District of Illinois? Hello, Mello. I love that you said in the chat, I'm asking, is this pointing to MEX trafficking? I love your play on words there. And yes, it is. By the way, you guys, when I go live, I have 3 ring lights. So it gets pretty toasty, right? So you may see me do a little dab. Okay. So I don't see any questions about the press release. So I'm going to jump straight into the actual indictment. Okay. All right, we are back. So here is the actual indictment from the Northern District of Illinois. So again, when we talk about court documents, let me make this maximum for you guys. So again, when we talk about court documents, we talked about this section, you know, this is your case caption, right? So you see it is the United States of America. That tells you that this is a federal case. You don't see the people of the state of Illinois. You don't see the people of the state of New York, right? You see the United States of America. That means this is a federal case. Then you see Robert Sylvester Kelly, R. Kelly, Daryl McDavid, which they mentioned, and Milton Brown, also known as June Brown, you also see the titles that they are being charged with violating, the federal law. So let's dive right in. Count 1. In or around 1998 or 1999 in Chicago, Robert Sylvester Kelly, also known as R. Kelly, did knowingly employ, use, persuade, induce, entice, and coerce a minor, namely minor 1. Pause. Whenever you see a charging document that mentions minors, more than likely you will see some type of pseudonym. It could be Jane Doe or John Doe, or in this instance, it could be minor 1 or minor 2. That is done to protect the identity of the minors. Minors have heightened privacy protections because they are underage. Okay. So, namely, minor 1, to engage in sexually explicit conduct for the purpose of producing a visual depiction of such conduct, namely, video 1. Another teaching moment. When you see the charging document referring to things by some type of name, such as video 1, video 2, that's your hint that they actually have the video. So this is not a sort of conspiracy to do something. This is not them thinking that he did something. This is them actually having possession of the video, which is why they have to identify it as video 1 so that the court knows what piece of evidence they're referring to. So namely, video 1. And defendant knew or had reason to know that such visual depiction would be transported in interstate or foreign commerce or mailed, or such visual depiction was actually transported in interstate or foreign commerce or mailed in violation of Title 18, United States Code, Section 2251A. So, wow, that was a lot of SAT words and legalese. So let's break it down. This is a charge to create mild pornography. That's what it is. It says that it accuses that Robert Kelly somehow convinced the minor, whether he did that by some type of persuasion, right, which would be me just convincing you to do something, or coercion, which would be me threatening you. He did get a minor to engage in conduct that was then turned into a video, and then he either knew that that video would be shared interstate, or he had some reason to know that it would be shared interstate, right? And another one of your key words here is when you see interstate commerce, that's the trigger that triggers federal law a lot of times, okay? So the moving interstate, the committing crimes, and then going from one state to the next, that is how a defendant gets themselves, in the eyesight of the federal government. So you see that they quoted a law here, right? Title 18, United States Code, Section 2251. So why don't we see what that is? So here, one of my favorite tools, your Cornell Law School Legal Information Institute. And here we have U.S. Code Title 18, Section 2251, the sexual exploitation of children. So this is the actual section of the law that R. Kelly is being charged under. Now, remember, they mentioned Section A, right? Well, here you have it, Section A. Any person who employs, uses, persuades, induces, entices, or coerces. So you see the language? Notice that a charging document mirrors the language that is in the law. It has to do that because it has to be sufficient in its accusations for you to actually be prosecuted with it, right? You do have constitutional rights which say that the agency prosecuting you should be able to have some level of proof. So that is why your charging document, which is your indictment or your complaint if you're in a state court, is going to mirror the actual law. And so you see, they just kind of reiterate what was already in the charging document, right? It's coercing or persuading a minor to engage in some type of sexual conduct and then creating a visual depiction of that conduct for the purpose of transmitting it or knowing that it could be transmitted. Okay, so let's go back to our indictment. You see, that's count 1. Notice that the indictment is broken into different counts. And remember, each of these counts is anywhere from 5 years in prison to 20 years in prison. Remember that the press release told us that, okay? So count 1, count 2 is more of the same, but note video 2, you guys. So now we know they have 2 videos, right? Let's see if there's any more. Count 3. Again, video 3. Okay. And notice this is still minor 1. So this is still the same minor. Now we're at 3 videos that they are accusing Robert Kelly of having in his possession, engaging in creating and knowing that that was going to be transported in some way. Okay. Now count 4, minor 1, video 4. So we are at 4 videos with this minor, okay? Count 5. Now they're talking about some of the things that are what is called material to this indictment, so important to this indictment. They discuss the fact that R. Kelly is an artist, a recording artist, right, who also has a company, which they call the Kelly businesses, okay? They then go on to talk about who Daryl McDavid is. They say that Daryl McDavid is Kelly's business manager. Okay, so now we know who he is. They then talk about Milton Brown, and he's just named as an employee of R. Kelly. Now we're getting into it. Now we're getting into how many minors the Northern District of Illinois is saying they can prove R. Kelly was involved with in a sexual way. So they have minor 1, who met Kelly when she was approximately 12 or 13 years old, allegedly. Minor 2, who met Kelly when she was approximately 17 years old, allegedly. Minor 3, who met Kelly when she was approximately 15 years old, allegedly. Minor 4, who met Kelly when she was approximately 16 years old, allegedly. Minor 5, who met Kelly when she was approximately 13 or 14 years old. So we have victims, alleged victims, as young as 12 and as old as 17. They then go on to say and accuse R. Kelly of engaging in sexual conduct. I already messed it up. You guys know me and these algorithms, and sexual acts with all of these minors when they were under the age of 18. They then go on to accuse R. Kelly of recording himself on video, engaging in this contact and these acts with these minors. So they are pretty much accusing in this indictment that they have videos of R. Kelly with all 5 of these minors. All right. And then they go on to confirm what we already knew, right? Video 1, 2, 3, and 4 all depict him having contact with minor 1 when minor 1 was under the age of 18. They then go on to discuss when this investigation began. So they tell you right here that in approximately April 2000, so approximately around that time, they started to investigate whether or not R. Kelly was sexually abusing minor 1. So it reads that minor 1 is the one who triggered this investigation. They then go on to say that in 2002, there was an indictment returned, right? And that in relation to video 1 and minor 1, R. Kelly was acquitted of those charges. So many of you remember that case, right? The case in which he was actually charged and he was actually cleared in that case, right? So it appears that even after he was acquitted of that particular case, the investigation continued. Now they talk about what Daryl McDavid is charged with, which, yeah, not very important to us, right? So we are going to kind of skip past that for the interest of time. But I will put the link to this indictment in the chat if you really want to read more about that. But here is what we will mention, though, because remember, the IRS is involved. Okay, so let's talk about those allegations. So here they allege that between approximately 2001 and 2009, R. Kelly and this person, Daryl McDavid, individual A and some others, which they call individual B, were paid hundreds of thousands of dollars for obtaining and returning multiple videos that they knew depicted Kelly in a contact and in certain acts with a minor. So this reads that there were some individuals who ended up in possession of these videos, and that R. Kelly, by way of McDavid, right, this person, allegedly paid these people to get the video back, right? So what does that say? That says a lot of things for the implication of these accusations. Here's the first thing. It says that Robert Kelly allegedly had knowledge that these videos were being shared with other people. That's the first thing. The next thing it says is that he was somehow actively involved in these videos, right? It wasn't some other person. Because were it some other person, why would he allegedly pay hundreds of thousands of dollars to get it back, right? Okay, it now goes on to say that in early 2007, R. Kelly and McDavid allegedly paid minor two, so paid another minor to retrieve, so $250,000 for this minor to return a tape that they knew that this minor was in possession of, that had Kelly on the tape allegedly engaged in certain type of contact and certain acts, right? So now we have another minor who was involved allegedly with R. Kelly. Somehow that minor actually has a tape, and we have R. Kelly paying that minor to get the tape back. That's the accusation. Again, the same two implications, right? You know it's being shared, allegedly, and it has to have you in it, or else you would not be so invested in getting it back. Now, in the law, that is something called admission of guilt, right? When someone behaves in a way that tells you, you have to be somehow implicated in this. You have to be somehow implicated because you're so invested in it, okay? So they go on to talk about some more instances in which R. Kelly allegedly paid people who somehow had these tapes for them to return them. Okay, and it goes into that some more. It then goes on to talk about the parent of a minor who somehow ended up with the videotape, right? It mentions that as well. It then goes on to talk about the obstruction of justice portion of this. So if you're unfamiliar with the charge of obstruction of justice, it is a charge that is reserved for someone who is somehow intervening with, involving themselves with a criminal investigation in a way that makes it difficult for the investigation to proceed. So it's reserved for someone who is allegedly hiding evidence, threatening witnesses so they won't testify, things like that, right? So let's see what the allegations are here. It was further part of the conspiracy that Kelly, McDavid, and others agreed to intimidate, threaten, pressure, persuade, and provide benefits and money to victims, victims' family members, witnesses, and others to ensure that they would destroy, conceal, cover up, falsify, and make a false entry in a record, document, and tangible object, and to continue to abide by previous false statements. So again, quite a bit of legalese, right? So let's break it down. In other words, they are accusing Robert Kelly and this gentleman, Darrell McDavid, of telling people, hey, we will hurt you if you testify. Or, hey, if I give you some money, will you not testify? And or if you do testify, will you say that nothing happened? That is the accusation. Okay. And there are some more details on those accusations online and on, several places on YouTube. There are quite a few people online who have accused R. Kelly of actually paying for victims to go on a vacation around the time of this investigation so that they wouldn't be available to be questioned. Okay. So the indictment goes on to talk more about the conspiracy. Again, more of the same, right? And you see here this section where they talk about overt acts. There is a reason that they're calling these acts overt, right? That's the level of proof that the government has to have when they're accusing someone of a conspiracy. And so your question is, well, what is a conspiracy? Well, a conspiracy is when you have one or more people, right, bonded together with a plan to do something illegal. To prove that these people had that plan, the government has the burden of proving that they took what is called overt acts to actually go forward with that plan. So here's an example. Let's say John and David say that they're going to rob a bank, right? It is not enough for them to just text, oh, we're going to rob, the Chase Bank on Acton Street. That's not enough. They have to actually do something to show that they mean it, to show, yeah, we're really going to do this. So perhaps they went to the store and they all bought black clothing and ski masks because that's what they agreed to wear. Perhaps they went and rented a car and then took the license plates off that car to use it as a getaway vehicle. These are the type of actions that the government have to prove to meet their burden of proof as far as conspiracy, right? So that is the reason that they're labeling this overt acts and that they're going into what they're saying R. Kelly and McDavid actually did in conspiracy with each other to interfere with the investigation and to purport the use of these videos, right? So here you have McDavid on Kelly's behalf, allegedly, received a video from minor 2 and individual C that depicted Kelly in contact with minor 1 and minor 2, right? And they go on to discuss some more of the overt acts that they can use to say, hey, McDavid and R. Kelly allegedly committed these crimes together. Now you see they go into count 6, and in count 7 as well, they talk some more about videos, right? Video 2 and video 3. And they go on to have several counts where they discuss each video, right? So the breakdown of it is that each video has its own count, okay? Again, they go into minor 3. Now, in this count, they say that, or they accuse R. Kelly of using the mail or any facility and means of interstate and foreign commerce to, again, persuade, entice, induce someone who had not attained the age of 18 years of age to engage in some type of activity. Now, here they quote section 2422B, okay? And I believe, I thought we had that up, but it looks like we have 243, which is fine. You guys know where to find that at this point, right? And we'll just round out this indictment so I can take some questions. Count 13, right? So keep note of how many counts there. So 13 criminal counts, okay? And then they get into the forfeiture, okay? So here's what the forfeiture is based on. They note here that any property constituting and traceable to gross profits and other proceeds obtained from such offense. So when you see the word forfeiture, the government is saying we are claiming rights to some type of money or asset that this defendant has, and we want to be paid that money or given that asset. So here in this first count here, you have the IRS pretty much saying, we believe that R. Kelly made some type of money from these videos. And whatever he made from these videos, whatever profit he obtained, he owes that to us because he obtained those profits illegally. Okay, and that is the end of your 25-page indictment from the Northern District of Illinois. I'm going to hop out of this screen and take some questions. So hello, everyone. Any questions about this indictment or about the charges from the Northern District of Illinois? Oh, I see some questions already. Having my water. You guys know I always have my water and my little towel here. Okay, so Crime Spotter wants to know, can the victim's family members be charged for receiving the money? And does that blank some charges? I don't know what the blank is for. But yes, the victim's family members can be charged. It is unlikely though. And here's why. So it is unlikely that the victim's family members will be charged because in order to build your case, so for those of you who are unaware, the government has to prove these charges beyond a reasonable doubt. That is a high burden, Crime Spotter. That's a high standard. So more than likely, they need the victim's family members to be witnesses. So it's not likely that they would charge them, although they could, because technically they were in possession of these videos as well, right? So they could be charged, but it's highly unlikely. What they will more than likely do is say to them, hey, immunity, right? Remember, we talked about immunity in the T.I. and Tiny video. Immunity from anything you could be charged with if you testify against Robert Kelly. So that is probably what will happen. Hi to Carla Martin. I think you're new here. Carla Martin wants to know, can you dissect the January 6th attack on the Capitol? Oh, okay. We can put that on our list. We can go for that next, Carla. Okay. Crime Spotter has another question. Oh, unrelated to R. Kelly. Since a federal case proved nothing against Michael Jackson, can his estate sue people who say that he did sexual things to them? There is a potential case there for defamation. Yes, Crime Spotter. And we could discuss that in another video. Are there any questions about the R. Kelly indictment that we just took a look at, or about any of the charges therein? So let's talk about potential prison time from what we just read. So we just looked at 13 counts in an indictment in which we know for sure that the minimum sentence is 5 years and the maximum sentence is 20 years. So listen, I'm not pulling up a calculator or anything, but I can tell you right at the outset, in that case that we just looked at, he's facing up to 20 years, give or take some more, in prison. And for a man of Robert Kelly's age, that is a life sentence, really, right? He's in his 50s. You're talking about perhaps your 70s before you have served your sentence, okay? Yes, so hi, Yvonne Diva. Yvonne Diva has an awesome channel. You guys should check her out. But yes, he's facing, in the Illinois case alone, up to 20 years in prison, okay? Crime Spotter wants to know, are there specific media houses that usually cover these cases more than others? Yes. So I recommend the New York Times, and for this kind of case, being that it's in Chicago, the Chicago Tribune, right? Those type of reputable media outlets. You still have to do your own research, but I recommend those. So for those of you who are unaware, oh, let me copy and paste the link for you. I did promise you the link to the indictment, right? So let me do that. So here's a direct link to the indictment. So, I mean, hey, some leisurely reading, if you like. So for those of you who are unfamiliar with this case, he is also facing prosecution in another state, right? He's also facing prosecution in the state of New York. So we are next going to go to, let me make sure everything is queued up for you, the press release from the state of New York and the actual indictment from the state of New York. Now you're going to notice that the New York indictment looks different than the Illinois indictment. So people hear the Department of Justice and they think that it's just one monolith, right? But it's not. As I said, it's so many different agencies and every district has their own agencies. So everyone does things differently. Even when I mentioned the term press case, they may not even call it a press case in Illinois. They might not use that terminology. That might just be New York terminology, right? So notice that things look a little different as you move into different districts, okay? Crime Spotter wants to know, is this a RICO case? There are some racketeering charges. I believe that is in the New York indictment. So let's hop into that. I'm going to share my screen and we are going to hop right on in. All righty, here we go. So let's look at the press release first. So here again, you see we're on justice.gov. Remember, I'm stressing to you guys, whenever it is a case that involves someone of this notability, the Department of Justice is going to do their own press release. So before you believe any of the talk online, look at what they said themselves. So here you have Department of Justice, United States Attorney's Office, Eastern District of New York. So this is yet another federal district, a separate federal case. Here they have R. Kelly charged with racketeering, see, including predicate acts of coercing and transporting minor girls to engage in blank. So they tell you right off the bat, not only are we accusing him of engaging in things with these minors, we are accusing him of transporting them for the purpose of engaging in these things. Again, those are the types of actions that take you from having the state prosecuting you to the federal government prosecuting you, right? When you're talking about transporting minors from one state to another for the purpose of doing something illegal to them or with them. So they then say charged conduct occurred over the course of 2 decades. So over the course of 20 years in New York, Connecticut, Illinois, and California. So let's pause for a moment and do the math on that, right? We're in 2021. You go back 20 years and that's what? 2001. And remember, we know that he was acquitted of that original case back in 2002. So what does that tell you? That tells you that while he was on trial in a state case, because that was the people of Illinois v. R. Kelly. So while R. Kelly was on trial fighting a state case, the federal government was already investigating him and building a federal case. So it is very important to note that, because when you see someone going through a state prosecution and they get acquitted, it is very likely that that is just the beginning of their troubles. Usually when you're on the state's radar, you're on the federal radar as well. All right, so here we go. A 5-count superseding indictment. Superseding indictment just means that they filed an original indictment and then they updated it. They filed a second one. That's it. Was unsealed today in federal court in Brooklyn. That means originally it was sealed, probably because it involves a minor, right? Sealed meaning it wasn't public. And now they've unsealed it so it's public and you can take a look at it. And it goes on to say, charging R&B singer Robert Sylvester Kelly, also known as R. Kelly, with racketeering predicated on criminal conduct, including sexual exploitation of children, kidnapping. Wow. Now, if you're new here, you may not know the difference between kidnapping and false imprisonment, but some of you who have been around, you know the difference, right? So you know that kidnapping is when you're moving the person from one place to another, okay? Forced labor and Mann Act violations involving the coercion and transportation of women and girls. Another moment, another teaching moment. When they say women and girls, they're not saying that for no reason, right? You guys, these press releases go through at least 4 to 5 hands and 4 to 5 edits before they are released. They're telling you right there that they are charging him not only with trafficking minors, but also with trafficking people who are also of age, right? So women and girls in interstate commerce to engage in illegal sexual activity. Kelly is also charged with 4 counts of violating the Mann Act related to his interstate transportation of a victim to New York to engage in illegal sexual activity and his exposure of her to an infectious venereal disease without her knowledge. Pause. So the Eastern District of New York is accusing R. Kelly of transporting a victim to New York to engage in illegal activity with her and exposing her to some type of STI in the act that he committed with her. Now, again, when you read these things kind of haphazardly, you can glaze over that, but that is extremely important, because if in fact he gave this girl some type of infection or disease, that is proof that he was with her in a sexual way, right? That is undeniable proof that he was with her. So it's going to be extremely hard for R. Kelly to say to this accusation, I was never with her, if in fact they can prove that he gave this victim some type of disease. They also mentioned that he was charged in Illinois, okay? They go on to, again, similar to the other press case, tell you who's involved, right? So here you have Richard P. Donahue, the United States Attorney for the Eastern District of New York. You have Angel M. Melendez, Special Agent in Charge for the United States Department of Homeland Security, right? And then you have James P. O'Neill, the Commissioner for the NYPD. So that tells you that Homeland Security, the United States Attorney, and the NYPD were all working in tandem, all working as a group to investigate and get all the information that they needed. Okay. They then go on to give a little bit more detail about what happened. They mention here that for 2 decades, the enterprise, again, keywords, enterprise, that is your trigger for racketeering and conspiracy and things like that. Okay. For 2 decades, the enterprise, at the direction of R. Kelly, preyed upon young women and teenagers whose dreams of meeting a superstar soon turned into a nightmare of MAPE, mild pornography, and forced labor. The musician turned predator allegedly used his stardom to coax some victims into nefarious acts, while certain members of his enterprise calculatingly facilitated the aberrant conduct. So from reading that, you can tell that they are accusing R. Kelly of having an enterprise, a system by which he recruited girls, he brought girls in, and that everyone involved in this system knew what they were doing. They knew why these girls were being brought in. They were not confused. They did not think that R. Kelly was actually going to give these girls any type of career, right? Everyone was on the same page. Everyone knew what these girls were being brought in for. That is the accusation. Okay. The NYPD gives their little blurb, right? They get their little moment in the sun saying that they are committed to taking down predators. Okay. And then the press release goes on to mention again prison time. They say here in this paragraph, if convicted, Kelly faces a sentence of up to 20 years of imprisonment for the racketeering and 2-man act coercion and enticement counts, respectively. Respectively, meaning what? That's not 20 years in total. Okay. And up to 10 years imprisonment for each of the man act transportation counts. So again, for a man of R. Kelly's age, he is facing what is equivalent to the rest of his life in prison. Okay. I'm going to stop sharing for a moment. Say hello to everyone who is present. I've given a shout out to most of you, Gavin. I've given a shout out to most of you. Hey, K Business. Hi, Stephanie Collins. Hi, Carla Martin. Let's see who else is here. Hi, Wayne Montgomery. I said hi to Crime Spotter already. I believe I shouted out Hello Mello. Hello, Amare Shager. Okay. Hi, G Thang. Let's see who else is in here. Oh, I think I've said hello to everyone. All right, so let me answer some questions. I see Wayne Montgomery wanted to know if Robert Kelly is being accused in multiple districts. He is. We actually looked at the charging document or the indictment from Illinois, and we're about to dive into the charging document from New York. Let's see. Crime Spotter wants to know, when a federal case is closed and it suddenly gets intense media coverage, can it be revisited to see if any victims were placed under duress, even by family members, to settle? Okay, so let's break that down, Crime Spotter. So if it's a criminal case, there's no settlement, right? When you're talking about a settlement, you're talking about a civil case. Now, as to your question of whether or not a case can be closed and reopened, yes. So let's make sure we make some distinctions. You do have something in the United States of America called double jeopardy, right? So for the most part, unless there was a mistrial or a hung jury or something like that, you cannot be charged for the same thing more than once. But investigating and charging are not the same. So let's say there was an investigation, it didn't really go anywhere, and then more evidence is found. Absolutely, that investigation can be reopened. Yes. Crime Spotter also wants to know, if it can't, but the media still covers it, What in their eyes was a miscarriage of justice? What can be done? Not quite understanding that question. So I'll let you rephrase that. Are there any other questions before we actually look at the indictment that was published, released slash unsealed by the Eastern District of New York? Do, 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 do. Oh, we already have a question. Wayne Montgomery says, will they run these sentences consecutive or concurrent? Ah, wonderful question. That depends. So if Robert Kelly decides to change his plea of not guilty and instead say, I am guilty, he may be able to work out an agreement with the prosecuting agencies to have all of these sentences run what is called concurrent. So here is the difference between concurrent sentencing and consecutive sentencing. So let's say someone is sentenced to 10 years in one count and 10 years in another. If those sentences are running concurrently, that means that they are serving actually not 20 years, right? But 10, because they are serving both sentences at the same time. But if those sentences are consecutive, that person is actually serving 20 years because they first have to serve the 10 on one count and then serve the next 10 on the other count. So Wayne Montgomery, it's possible maybe they can work out a deal with prosecution where they can have these sentences running, concurrently. But even so, he's still looking at 10 to 20, any way you look at it, right? So he is looking at a lot of prison time, you guys. All right, so I don't see any other questions. Give it a second. All right, so let's dive right in. I'm going to share my screen again, and we are going to look at the state of New York. Well, I shouldn't say state of New York. I should say the Eastern District of New York indictment. Full screen. Here we go. So here you see that they're telling you all the business here, right? July 10th, 2019 in the Brooklyn office. This is a superseding indictment. So this is not the first indictment, right? This is what I would call an updated indictment, right? The law calls it superseding, but I'm saying it in layman's terms so we all can be on the same page, okay? Eastern District of New York, Robert Sylvester Kelly, okay? The grand jury charges, and then they go into the charges. So here they start with the enterprise. That's your hint that they're going to start telling you what they are accusing R. Kelly of doing that was a criminal enterprise, right? That was a group effort. So here they say the defendant, Robert Sylvester Kelly, also known as R. Kelly, and individuals who served as managers, bodyguards, drivers, personal assistants, and runners for Kelly, as well as members of Kelly's entourage. So again, they are being very specific in saying this was a group effort on the part of everyone around Robert Kelly who allegedly were all involved in this and all knew what they were doing, okay? They then go on to say this enterprise constituted of a group of individuals associated, in fact, and engaged in activities which affected interstate and foreign commerce. So remember, interstate and foreign commerce, that's our federal trigger. That's how you go from someone being accused with a state crime, like in the people of Illinois v. R. Kelly, to federal crimes, okay? They then go on to say the enterprise constituted an ongoing organization whose members functioned as a continuing unit for a common purpose of achieving the objectives of the enterprise. A lot of legalese, right? All they're saying is, listen, this group of people were all on the same page. They all had a common purpose, and it was not an isolated incident. So it wasn't one time or two times or random. It was a consistent effort for them to continuously do these things together. That is the allegation. They then go on to say that the purpose of the enterprise, and now they're telling you what they believe the purpose was to promote R. Kelly's music and R. Kelly as a brand, and to recruit women and girls to engage in illegal sexual activity with Kelly. By promoting R. Kelly's music and the R. Kelly brand, the members of the enterprise expected to receive financial opportunities and personal benefits, including increased power and status within the enterprise. So they're describing here what some would call a quid pro quo, right? So they're describing that in exchange for being a part of this enterprise where these people allegedly recruited women and recruited girls, they got not only money, but also power and status because they get to bask in the light of this big celebrity, R. Kelly, right? They then go on to say that the enterprise traveled throughout the United States. Again, the federal trigger, the traveling while allegedly recruiting women and girls. They go on to talk about how they coerced some of these girls allegedly. And they say that at many of R. Kelly's performances, women and girls were invited backstage. These women and girls were often given wristbands, which signified that they were authorized to attend the event. So the accusation is that the enterprise would recruit women and girls, bring them to R. Kelly's shows to meet up with R. Kelly, and they were given special access to sort of entice them to come to these shows, okay? They then go on to accuse R. Kelly of giving his contact information to any women or any girls that he wanted to see again. They then say that he communicated with these women and these girls by telephone, including phone calls, text messages, iMessages, and FaceTime. As part of this communication, Kelly often requested that the women and girls provide him with photographs of themselves. Let's take a moment to break all of that down. Remember, we talked about the purposefulness that is in these documents. When you're looking at an indictment, nothing is an accident. Everything the government puts in there, they put it in there for a reason. So when you see them saying text messages, iMessages, FaceTime, you already know they're saying that. Why? Because they have text messages, because they have the iMessages, and because they have proof of FaceTime conversations. Also, when they're talking about the photographs, they probably have copies of those pictures and or proof that those pictures exist. All right. They then go on to say that R. Kelly allegedly facilitated the travel of these women and these girls, and that members of the enterprise would arrange for these girls to travel to wherever R. Kelly needed them to be, right? And make sure that they had lodging while they were there. So make sure they had somewhere to stay while they were there. Now it's getting juicy. Now they go into some of R. Kelly's alleged rules for his partners. A, the women and girls were not permitted to leave their room without receiving permission from R. Kelly, including to eat or go to the bathroom. The women and girls were required to wear baggy clothing when they were not accompanying Kelly, unless otherwise instructed by Kelly. The women and girls were not permitted to look at other men and instead were told to keep their heads down. And the women and girls were required to call Kelly daddy. Again, why would they say this, right? What would be the reason that they would want to include these quote unquote rules in the indictment? Well, if you're going to accuse someone of taking someone and forcing them to be engaged in certain activities, right? You want to establish that the person really didn't have a choice. So what they're establishing by putting these rules in the indictment is they're establishing that R. Kelly was treating these women in a way in which, first of all, they really had no freedom to leave, because you're kept in a room and you're not told, you're kept in a room and you're not permitted to leave, right? So that's the first thing. The next thing they want to establish is that he was brainwashing them, allegedly, right? They're not allowed to look at other men. They have to call him daddy. So the government is trying to paint a picture for you of girls who were not only being, abused and used in a sexual way, but being brainwashed and being imprisoned during the brainwashing. Okay. They then go on to say that the enterprise operated within the Eastern District of New York and elsewhere, including overseas. So again, they're hinting to you that these allegations also occurred when R. Kelly was traveling all over the world, right? Allegedly. Now they're going to get into some of the methods and means of the enterprise. So why is that important? It is important for them to discuss the method and means of the enterprise because no organization, no group can be ran without rules, right? Without conduct, without a how do you do something and why are you doing it? So they are starting to kind of prove their charges because here they're going to talk about how this group of people allegedly did these things and why they did these things. So here you see they just talk about facilitation of sexual activity between R. Kelly and these children. And here they say that the enterprise was recruiting these girls without disclosing a sexually transmitted disease that Kelly had and had contracted during the producing of these videos. As you guys can see, I'm getting the mush mouth from all this talking. Water. Okay. So then they go into demanding absolute commitment to Kelly and not tolerating dissent. Again, the means and methods of this enterprise. It's important to note that Kelly and his enterprise did not tolerate dissent because that means that if there was someone present who said to them, I don't think what we're doing is right. I think what we're doing is illegal. We shouldn't do this. That person was punished. And that is another one of the telltale signs, right? And another part of the elements when you're talking about a criminal organization. Just like with the mafia and the mob and things like that, people are punished when they try to say, what we're doing probably isn't right. So that's why they're diving into that. They then say, allegedly, that the enterprise would obtain sensitive information about members and associates of the enterprise to maintain control over them. So when someone tried to wiggle a bit and tried to say, I don't think what we're doing is right, the enterprise, the group would actively get information about that person that they could use to control them and or blackmail them. Again, another telltale sign of a criminal group. Criminal groups tend to have information over people, which they use to keep them from doing what? Telling the authorities about them, right? They then go on to say the group had the purpose of recruiting and grooming sexual partners from R. Kelly and isolating women and girls from their friends and family and making them dependent on Kelly for their financial well-being. Again, another callback to the brainwashing, the alleged brainwashing of the women and the girls, which plays right into the trafficking and the coercing and persuading someone to do things that they don't want to do. They then say that allegedly Robert Sylvester Kelly was the leader of the enterprise. They then go into some of the racketeering, right? As you can see, when we talk about the fact that different districts use different language, in Illinois, they said what? Minor 1 and minor 2. Here in New York, they're saying Jane Doe number 1, right? And Jane Doe number 2. So as I said, the Department of Justice is not a monolith. You have different agencies, different protocols, things like that. So here they say that with Jane Doe 1, there was an individual who did engage in some conduct together with R. Kelly, allegedly with this Jane Doe number 1, right? They then get into racketeering act number 2, right? So for act 1, they're pretty much saying that R. Kelly may have not been the only person that was engaging in some type of conduct with the women and the girls who were there. And, you know, as far as pop culture goes with the accusations that have been publicly made, it has been stated publicly that sometimes victims were allegedly made to have conduct with each other and that there were also sometimes other men involved in some of this conduct, okay? They then go into Jane Doe number 2 and they accuse that Jane Doe was induced and enticed to go from one place to another and then kept in the second place against her will, okay? Then they get into the transportation of Jane Doe number 2, saying that she was transported. They get into another act of transportation with Jane Doe number 2. They go into Jane Doe number 3, right? So notice how many counts we have here. We're on count 4 just in the racketeering section. Again, they restate the same charges with multiple women. So now we're in Jane Doe number 3, count number 6. Remember, each of these counts, you're facing a minimum of 5 and up to 20, right? That's the range, okay? And again, we're going to Jane Doe number 3, same counts. Jane Doe number 4. So now you have 4 different individuals, the same accusations, okay? Now they're getting into accusation number 7. So count 7. Again, accusing that Jane Doe number 4 was transported for those purposes. They get into coercion. They talk about the fact that Jane Doe number 4 was allegedly a minor when these things occurred. So when she was transported and when the conduct and the activity with her occurred, she was allegedly under the age of 18, right? They get into transporting minors. And you're going to see that it's the same charges over and over again, just for each person, okay? So Jane Doe number 4, the same charges are repeated. And we're now on what, page 12 of the indictment. Jane Doe number 5, again, the same charges. We're now on page 14. The same charges being repeated for Jane Doe number 5. And then they have their forfeiture section, which we know is pretty much just them saying, any money that was obtained from the conduct that is alleged in this indictment. So if in fact it's proven that R. Kelly did any of the things that the government is saying, and he made any money from these things, we want that money. That money belongs to us because he got it in an illegal way, okay? And that is the end of this indictment. This indictment is 17 pages long, okay? So I'm going to copy this and I'm going to put it in our chat so everyone has it. I'm also going to stop sharing. Control paste. Okay. And I see someone is thanking Pocket Watching with JT on his milestone. I think he made 10,000, am I right? Or 9,000? One of those, but congrats, JT, on that. So does anyone have any questions for me about the indictment that we just looked at? Sorry about the cotton mouth that I'm getting. I'm tripping over words. It happens. I don't see any questions right now. So if there aren't any questions, we're going to move on. Oh, wow, we're over an hour. That's not usual for us. If there's no questions, we're going to move on to what's happening in R. Kelly's case now. Oh, so Wayne says, with a superseding indictment, does that mean they added additional charges or more defendants to an indictment? Good question from Wayne Montgomery. So a superseding indictment could mean a number of things. So it could mean that charges were added. It could mean that defendants were added. It could also mean that victims were added. So it could mean any of those things, okay? Carla Martin wants to know, is Kelly the only one facing charges? No. So we spoke about some of his alleged co-conspirators. They mentioned a man named McDavid, and they also mentioned a man by the name of June Brown or Milton Brown, I believe, right? So there are other people that are involved. Crime Spotter wants to know, is there anyone in the organization who has turned a witness against R. Kelly? We don't know that. We don't know that. But here's what I will say. It is possible, and I am going to go as far as to say, in my humble opinion, that it is likely. And here's why I think that. We talked about the prison time here, right? We're talking about 10, 20, maybe even 40 years in prison time. When you are facing that much time, it is likely that human nature will make you do whatever you have to do to get out of that. I mean, imagine the lengths that you'd be willing to go to if someone told you you're looking at 20 to 40 years in prison. So whenever you see jail time that's getting into the 20s and the 40s, you know that it is very likely that people are going to flip on each other because nobody wants to spend that kind of time in prison. It's not a 3 to 5 or a 5 to 8 that someone might just take because it'll give them street cred, right? No, we've gone beyond street cred when we're talking about 20 years in prison. So very likely that somebody will flip on him. Stephanie Collins wants to know, does this indictment charge him with the actual mexual acts? Yes, the indictment does mention the actual acts, the New York indictment, but the New York indictment focuses more so on the transportation and the racketeering. They're more so focused on that. All right. Oh, Crime Spotter is speaking patois in the chat. All righty, Crime Spotter. I should have known you were Jamaican because you brought up Vibes Cartel before, right? What's up? Stephanie says, yeah, they're not going to tell us that. Right, right. So if in fact someone does flip on R. Kelly and decide to testify against him, we would not know that in the public probably until well after the trial is done, or maybe in the process of the trial, if the trial is public, but definitely not before. They would never endanger the person in that way. That is true. Okay, so we are going to move ahead to what's going on in R. Kelly's case now. So we're actually going to look at some different press outlets who have been talking about some of the motions that are being filed in R. Kelly's case and talk about what could be happening behind the scenes that is causing a lot of the talk and the hubbub with R. Kelly's case right now. All right, so let's do that. You guys know I have everything queued up for you. So I'm just going to share my screen and we'll hit the queue. We'll go full screen. Let's start with, which one do I want to start with? I actually want to start with this article here. So the title of this article is 2 Lawyers Removed from R. Kelly's Case 2 months before federal trial. So with 2 months before R. Kelly is due to stand trial in Brooklyn for racketeering and mex trafficking, 2 of his top lawyers reportedly no longer want to represent him. Interesting. I mean, which attorney would turn down this kind of prestige, right? Well, let's see. Steve Greenberg and Michael Leonard filed a request to withdraw from the case on Monday, June 7th. The attorneys told a judge during a status conference on Wednesday, June 9th, that they did not want to represent Kelly and cited an alleged lack of cooperation from his other 2 lawyers. And this is a direct quote from Greenberg. Everyone wants to do the opening. Everyone wants to do the closing. And that just can't be, Greenberg explained. It got to the point where we went to discuss these concerns with Mr. Kelly, and Mr. Kelly wouldn't meet with us. Let's pause for a moment. So Greenberg and Leonard seem to be throwing the other attorneys under the bus, right? In my humble opinion, by saying that the other attorneys aren't working with them. But notice that Greenberg says that Mr. Kelly, R. Kelly, is refusing to meet with them, right? He won't meet with them. So here's the thing. When you have celebrities who are having these high profile cases, right, with this much prison time, you always have a team of attorneys. If you want to go back a little blast from the past, think OJ, right? OJ had a team. These celebrities will always have a team of attorneys. That's not new. And usually these attorneys work together. It is very, very usual for a celebrity to have a team, and very, very usual for that team to break down what everyone is doing, right? So for example, one attorney does the opening, another does the closing. One attorney does the examination of a certain witness, right? But here's the thing. Whenever there is a squabble between the attorneys as to who is doing what, ultimately, the decision is given to the client. So even though Greenberg and Leonard are throwing the other attorneys under the bus, it comes down to the fact that it sounds like, allegedly, R. Kelly is refusing to make decisions. Because at the end of the day, R. Kelly makes the ultimate decision, right? So he's refusing to meet with his attorneys, allegedly, and refusing to make decisions that are extremely important in his case. Okay. So they then go on to say another defense attorney, Thomas Farinella, claimed that Kelly had actually decided to let Greenberg and Leonard go. He does not wish to have Mr. Greenberg or Mr. Leonard represent him, Farinella said. Greenberg claimed that he received a document from someone claiming to be the power of attorney for Kelly and that he attempted to meet with Kelly twice, but he refused. So again, It is usual for a team of attorneys with all these different egos to have squabbles. But at the end of the day, the client is in control. The client is supposed to be making decisions. So what we're hearing is what? R. Kelly was refusing to make decisions. Okay. So then Greenberg says he received an email from R. Kelly saying that he did not want to continue working with him. Judge Ann Donnelly ordered that Greenberg and Leonard submit their grievances in writing to the court. The judge then said, while we realize that this request comes close to trial, and although we are ready to proceed to trial as scheduled in August, our reasons for withdrawal are significant. Oh, excuse me, this is Greenberg, not the judge. And it is impossible, in our belief, for us to be able to continue to properly represent Mr. Kelly under the current circumstances. And that, my people, is the gist of it. Whenever you see an attorney withdraw from a case, it is usually because that attorney feels that they cannot do their job. And usually because they feel they cannot do their job because their client won't cooperate. That is usually what's going on behind the curtain, okay? So one more article I'm going to look at. This is federal judge in Brooklyn sets conflict of interest hearing in R. Kelly case. So here you have more drama could be brewing for R. Kelly's legal team, as a federal judge in Brooklyn on Friday scheduled a hearing typically meant to determine whether a lawyer has a conflict of interest in a case. The judge did not explain what prompted the hearing, but she had previously ordered Kelly's Chicago-based attorneys to file a letter under seal explaining why they decided earlier this week to withdraw from Kelly's racketeering case in Brooklyn. So, what does that mean? Well, that means the judge is requesting that these two attorneys who withdrew send her a letter that she's not going to, publicly release. It'll be under seal. So it'll be for her eyes only, right? Explaining why they decided to withdraw. Now, she may be wondering what is going on these team of attorneys. She may have concerns that these attorneys are withdrawing because there are things that are happening that could be violating Kelly's rights, right? So maybe she has some concerns that some of these attorneys are not communicating properly. Maybe she has some concerns that some of these attorneys have ulterior motives. So that may be what she wants to know. She may want to know, hey, what is it that's going on there? Why are you withdrawing? Is there something that could cause me to have a mistrial here? Are there some constitutional rights as far as effective assistance of counsel, right? So having effective lawyers. Is there something going on here in which R. Kelly might not be actually getting effective counsel? Is there something going on that I need to know about? That is pretty much what the judge is saying, okay? And so she set that hearing so that she can have those conversations. And then it says that Greenberg did send her the typical letter, same from the other case, where they say that they believe that it is impossible for them to represent R. Kelly. So I'm going to stop sharing now. I am back in the chat with you all to see if you have any questions. I see there's a conversation going on about Epstein and R. Kelly. Interesting. So I'll take some questions about these current motions. Again, coming from, my experience and the things that I've observed, right? Usually when you have attorneys withdrawing from a case, yes, it could be because of attorney squabble, but it really comes down to the client. Because even when you have attorneys squabbling, the client holds the power. And so what is really happening here, probably allegedly, is that R. Kelly is not making decisions. He is allegedly kind of withdrawing from this situation. And if you read some of the other articles that are out there, there are a lot of allegations out there that R. Kelly is in a place of hopelessness when it comes to this case, that he feels very, very discouraged. And so I think, in my opinion, that he may be withdrawing and he may not be communicating with his attorneys. And that means trouble for him, because that means that it's going to be difficult for his attorneys to effectively represent him if he's not communicating with them. Okay. So we are at 6:15. That means we've been on for a little over an hour, which usually I'm only on here for an hour and then I hop off. So I'll give you guys a minute or two to throw some questions at me, and then I'll head on out of here. Wayne Montgomery wants to know, is this a money issue with Kelly's legal team because of COVID-19? No. So usually if attorneys are withdrawing because they have not been paid, they will make that clear. There is no shame in letting the court know, hey, I have to withdraw because I'm not being paid and I can't work for free. There's no shame in that. So in my opinion, if that is what was going on, they would just say that. They are saying that they cannot represent him. And that is, hint, hint, he's not making decisions. We are having internal squabbles and he is not wielding the power he has and shutting it down. Okay. So before I head out, let me ask a quick question. How does everyone feel about this Sunday at 5? Put a 1 in the chat if you like lives on Sunday at 5. Put a 2 in the chat if you would prefer Saturday at 5 or some other day in the evening. So again, the question is, do you like lives on Sunday at 5 p.m.? If so, put a 1 in the chat. If there is some other day you would prefer, put a 2 in the chat. Okay, so everyone seems to like Sunday at 5. Awesome. So we'll keep it Sunday at 5, okay? And I see there's a comment about potential self-harm. I am sure that the correction facility where they're housing Mr. Kelly, they're keeping a watch on him and they're making sure that if he needs any type of help or any type of support, he's receiving that, right? We're going to say in a positive note that we're sure they're keeping an eye on him and making sure that he's okay. Sherry Ann Turpin says, I would like to have you on my podcast. Sherry Ann Turpin, you are free to reach out to me. I'm going to put my email in the chat, and that goes for everyone. You guys know I love you guys. I love my subbies. And I always share my email address and tell you, feel free to reach out to me. I'm a legal nerd who loves having these conversations and who feels, quite frankly, a responsibility to share the knowledge that I've acquired. You know, we live in a country where it can be difficult to obtain advanced education. And so I truly feel that people who have been able to go to law school and become, licensed to practice the law, lawyers and attorneys, I truly feel that we have a responsibility in a way to share information with other people, you know? So per usual, you guys, our tagline here is life lessons through a legal lens. So what have we learned today? Well, we've learned that the Department of Justice has its own press releases. So you do not have to rely on some other media outlet or chit chat on Instagram to tell you what's going on in a high profile case. You can go straight to justice.gov, type it in the search bar, and find the press release from the Department of Justice. Okay, that was our little lesson for today. So listen, I've been on here for almost an hour and a half, so I want to make sure that anyone who's catching us later can hop on. I want to say, let me see your transcript. Yes, we've learned another good lesson today. Cooperate with your attorney. Your attorney is there to help you, right? Facilitate that. Thank you for being here and spending this time with me and for your awesome questions. And I will see you next Sunday at 5. I may or may not drop a surprise during the week. See you guys soon.